On September 23, 2025, President Donald Trump made a dramatic return to the United Nations General Assembly, stepping onto the world stage for his first address since the start of his second term. The anticipation was palpable, with diplomats, journalists, and world leaders all eager to hear what direction the United States would take under his renewed leadership. The iconic UN headquarters in New York buzzed with speculation and tension, as many wondered if Trump's approach would echo his previous tenure or chart a new course. The world watched closely as Trump delivered a forceful America First speech, one that felt more like a campaign rally than a diplomatic address. His words were bold, unapologetic, and unmistakably combative, setting the tone for what would become a defining moment in international relations. Delegates from every continent listened intently, some with concern, others with approval, as Trump laid out his vision for America's role in the world. He rejected calls for global unity, instead doubling down on nationalism, strong borders, and traditional values. Trump's rhetoric was clear. He believed that each nation should put its own interests first, and that the era of globalist cooperation had led to stagnation and insecurity. He painted a picture of a world where sovereign nations, not international bodies, would determine their own destinies. Trump openly criticized the United Nations itself, using a malfunctioning teleprompter, and even the building's slow escalator as metaphors for what he described as the organization's inefficiency and dysfunction. He argued that the UN, once a beacon of hope for global cooperation, had become bogged down by bureaucracy and indecision, unable to address the real challenges facing the world today. He argued that globalist ideals had failed, urging nations to prioritize their own interests above all else. Trump called on leaders to protect their borders, defend their cultures, and focus on the prosperity of their own people. He insisted that only by doing so could countries achieve true security and lasting peace. His speech was a direct challenge to the post-war global order, signaling that the United States would no longer be bound by old alliances or multilateral agreements that, in his view, no longer served American interests. Trump made it clear that his administration would chart its own course, regardless of international pressure or criticism. Allies and adversaries alike received a clear and unmistakable message. The Trump administration was doubling down on its nationalist agenda. Some leaders appeared unsettled, while others nodded in agreement, recognizing that a new era of American foreign policy had arrived. The speech sparked immediate debate in diplomatic circles, with many questioning what this shift would mean for global stability and cooperation. As news of Trump's fiery address spread across the globe, governments and citizens alike began to grapple with the implications. The world would have to adjust to this new reality, one where the United States, under Trump's leadership, was determined to go its own way, reshaping the international order in its image. At the heart of Trump's speech was deep skepticism of global institutions and climate science. He dismissed the UN as ineffective, claiming it offered only empty words and wasted resources. Trump called climate change a hoax, framing environmental policies as economic sabotage designed to benefit rivals like China. He condemned clean energy as all green means bankruptcy, mocking Europe's transition to renewables. Trump argued that only traditional energy, oil, gas, coal, could ensure prosperity and security. He urged nations to abandon costly green policies and focus on energy independence. By labeling climate action a scam, he sought to delegitimize the global environmental movement. This stance set the stage for major international disagreements. Trump devoted much of his address to immigration, calling it an existential threat to Western nations. He warned Europe that uncontrolled immigration would destroy its heritage and security. Trump claimed migrants erode national identity and increase crime, urging immediate deportations. He linked immigration to social decay, echoing themes from his domestic campaigns. Trump singled out London's Muslim mayor, Sadiq Khan, with false claims about Sharia law, stoking fears of cultural change. His rhetoric appealed to nationalist movements across Europe. Trump argued that fighting radical Islam required strict border controls. His message, only strong borders could preserve Western civilization. Donald Trump's criticism of Europe was not limited to a few passing remarks. It was a full-scale attack on the continent's economic and energy policies, delivered on the world stage. He accused European leaders of making decisions that, in his view, undermined their own economies and weakened their global standing. Trump openly mocked Europe's ambitious clean energy transition, arguing that the push for renewables had led to widespread job losses and the shuttering of once thriving industries. He painted a picture of a continent sacrificing its prosperity for what he called unrealistic environmental goals, leaving workers behind and communities struggling. He contrasted what he described as Europe's economic decline with the resilience and strength of the United States. Trump cited emissions data claiming that Europe's sacrifices had little impact on global pollution, especially compared to rising emissions from countries like China. According to him, Europe's efforts were both costly and ineffective. Trump also took aim at Europe's reliance on Russian energy, warning that such dependence made the continent vulnerable to political pressure from Moscow. He threatened to impose tariffs on Russian goods unless European nations reduced their energy imports, using economic leverage to push allies closer to U.S. policy. His attacks extended beyond economics and energy. Trump criticized the United Nations and the European Union's open border policies, arguing that these principles threatened national security and eroded the sovereignty of individual countries. He urged European nations to reclaim their independence, embrace traditional energy sources like oil and gas, and reject what he called globalist agendas that, in his view, put ideology ahead of citizens' well-being. Trump's speech resonated with nationalist and Eurosceptic movements across Europe, emboldening politicians and activists who were already challenging the EU's authority and vision for the continent's future. By positioning himself as a champion for those who believe Europe has lost its way, Trump amplified divisions within the EU and inspired a new wave of debate about the continent's direction, sovereignty, and identity. Trump shifted to celebrating what he called America's new golden age. He touted economic growth, deregulation, and tax cuts as proof of American exceptionalism. Trump claimed the U.S. had the world's cleanest air, blaming pollution on other countries. He declared his border policies a total success, crediting mass detentions and deportations for stopping illegal immigration. Trump highlighted military modernization and increased defense spending as evidence of renewed strength. He presented a narrative of national revival, economic, environmental, and military. This report card was designed to justify his America First approach. In a surprise move, Trump reversed his stance on Ukraine, now backing a full Ukrainian victory over Russia. He called Russia a paper tiger and pledged U.S. weapons to help Ukraine reclaim its territory. Trump suggested NATO should be ready to shoot down Russian aircraft violating member airspace, raising the stakes. He left U.S. involvement ambiguous, keeping allies guessing. European and Ukrainian leaders welcomed the shift, seeing it as renewed American commitment. The pivot caught both allies and adversaries off guard. Trump's unpredictable approach added new complexity to the conflict. The world took note of this dramatic policy change. At the United Nations General Assembly, President Donald Trump took the stage with a message that was both forceful and unmistakable. He used his address to reaffirm the United States' unwavering support for Israel, making it clear that his administration stood firmly by its closest Middle Eastern ally. Trump's words echoed through the Assembly Hall, signaling a continuation of his administration's hardline approach to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. He openly rejected the recent recognitions of Palestinian statehood by several countries, arguing that such moves undermine the prospects for genuine peace. Trump framed these recognitions as dangerous rewards for Hamas, a group the U.S. and Israel both label as a terrorist organization. In his view, granting legitimacy to Palestinian statehood at this moment only served to delegitimize the broader international movement for Palestinian sovereignty and risked emboldening extremist factions. Trump insisted that any ceasefire in Gaza should be contingent upon the unconditional release of all hostages, a stance that closely aligned with Israel's demands and left little room for compromise. He dismissed the two-state solution as it was currently being pursued, arguing that peace could not be imposed from the outside or achieved through international declarations. Instead, Trump signaled that the only path to Palestinian statehood would be through direct negotiations between the parties, with no shortcuts or external pressure. His remarks drew a sharp divide in the assembly, applause and approval from the Israeli delegation, but condemnation and visible frustration from many other world leaders. Outside the UN, protests erupted, with demonstrators voicing their anger at what they saw as a one-sided approach that ignored Palestinian aspirations and suffering. Trump also reminded the world of his administration's controversial decision to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem and the signing of the Abraham Accords, which normalized relations between Israel and several Arab nations, moves he touted as historic breakthroughs for peace. He issued a stern warning that any nation attempting to pressure or isolate Israel at the United Nations would face strong opposition from the United States, including the use of its veto power in the Security Council. In this charged atmosphere, the United States remained a central and often controversial player in the ongoing conflict, shaping the debate and influencing the course of international diplomacy. Reactions to Trump's speech revealed a deeply divided world. Human rights groups condemned his rhetoric on immigration, warning it threatened asylum seekers' rights. European leaders, especially France's Macron, defended the UN and climate action, directly countering Trump. UN Secretary-General Guterres called for unity and multilateral solutions, subtly rejecting Trump's nationalism. Nationalist leaders worldwide embraced Trump's America First message as a model. The speech energized populist movements and deepened ideological divides. Trump's address didn't change minds. It hardened positions. The world stage was left more polarized than ever. Trump's 2025 UN speech was a bold declaration of the Trump doctrine. He called for a world of assertive nation-states, challenging the foundations of the UN and NATO. His attacks on climate policy, immigration, and alliances signaled increased friction with traditional allies. The U.S. withdrawal from global leadership on climate and multilateralism could weaken international frameworks. Trump's vision nations prioritizing self-interest over global stability, risking a fragmented world. His speech tapped into nationalism and distrust of global elites, offering a confrontational alternative to diplomacy. Whether this leads to a golden age or chaos remains to be seen. One thing is clear: the U.S., under Trump, will forge its own path.